It started with my phone, because of course it did, not with an affair or some grand betrayal, but because I forgot to mute a notification during his very important ranked match. His head snapped towards me like I'd just set fire to his favourite jersey. "Are you fucking kidding me?" he hissed, as if I'd planned it, as if the text from my sister about her dog's birthday was a personal attack on his gaming career. I should have rolled my eyes, I should have laughed. But 3 years of this shit had trained me like a Pavlovian dog. My shoulders tensed, my voice already shrinking into that placating murmur. "Sorry, I didn't realise." "You never realise." He slammed his controller down, the plastic cracking against the coffee table. "It's like you don't even care." And there it was, the leap from "you made a mistake" to "you are a mistake." Classic. I could have recited his next lines for him. "I do so much for us. You're so selfish. We're done." But this time, something in me just snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet, final click, like a lock turning. He was pacing now, working himself into the usual performance. The wounded sighs, the dramatic runs of hands through his hair. "I can't keep doing this," he said, voice thick with faux exhaustion, like he was the one constantly bending. I said nothing. Fine. He grabbed his keys, the jingle so familiar it was almost nostalgic. "If you're gonna act like this, we're done." There it was. His trump card. His "we're done," delivered with the gravitas of a Shakespearean death scene. He paused at the door, shoulders tense, waiting for the scripted response. My tears, my "please don't go," my "I'll do better." Silence. I took a sip of wine, swelled it, watched the legs cling to the glass. The door slammed so hard the frame shook. And then, peace. Glorious, deafening peace. No sobbing, no frantic typing of apologies. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the dawning realization I didn't run after him. I waited for the panic to hit, for the ache in my chest, the desperate need to fix it. But all I felt was lightness, like I'd been carrying a boulder and only noticed when I finally set it down. My phone buzzed. A follow-up text. "You're really gonna just sit there?" I turned it face down, finished my wine, and for the first time in years, I breathed. I used to keep a mental catalogue of his exits, the way he'd throw his jacket on just so when he wanted me to notice he was leaving, the practiced tremor in his voice when he'd say "this isn't working." Each time, I fell for it like it was the first time, scrambling to patch the cracks in us before they could split wide open. There was the instant of the burnt toast, where he dramatically pushed his plate away and announced our relationship was as ruined as his breakfast. I spent 40 minutes apologising while he stared out the window like a brooding romance novel cover. Then came the great Spotify betrayal when I dared skip his emo playlist in the car. "You don't respect my taste in anything," he'd said, voice dripping with wounded pride, and I spent the rest of the drive listing every song of his I did like, as if my love could be measured in melodic validation. The worst was the rainstorm standoff. He'd stormed out during a dinner party because I laughed too much at his friend's joke. I found him 3 blocks away, sulking under an awning, and begged him to come back in the downpour while he let me shiver just long enough to feel punished. Every fight followed the same sacred ritual. His outrage, my repentance, his gracious bestowal of forgiveness. Until next time. I used to think love was this, swallowing your pride like bitter medicine and calling it devotion. But standing there in the wreckage of the last fight, I realised something sickeningly simple. He'd never actually left. Not really. Not once. Because leaving would mean walking away from something you don't plan to return to. What he did was take dramatic intermissions, waiting in the wings for his cue, my sobbing voicemails, my "I'll change promises," to come back for his encore. The patterns weren't just memories, they were blueprints. And for the first time, I saw the design for what it was. A house built to keep me small, where every door only opened inward, where every window showed a view of him. I scrolled through our old texts, pages of my pleading, his laconic "we'll see" replies, and something in me curdled. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold, clear knowing. I'd been an extra in my own love story. The wine glass in my hand caught the light, casting fractured rainbows across the wall. I tipped it slightly, watching the colours shift. The apartment exhaled when he left. The walls seemed to relax, the air itself lighter without the weight of his expectations, pressing against every surface. I stood in the centre of the living room, bare feet on cool hardwood, and realised with a jolt that I could do anything, absolutely anything. I started with the thermostat. He always insisted on 72 degrees, claiming anything warmer made him claustrophobic. My fingers hovered over the controls before cranking it to 78, just because I could. The rush of warm air through the vents felt like a rebellion. In the kitchen, I made toast and deliberately let it burn. Not to the charcoal stage he'd once staged a breakup over, but just enough to crisp the edges golden brown. I slathered it with butter and apricot jam, his least favourite combination, and ate it standing at the counter like some kind of sacrament. Each crunch between my teeth was a tiny revolution. The bedroom smelled like his cologne, that woodsy scent he'd chosen because some influencer said it projected dominance. I stripped the sheets in one violent yank, balling up the fabric where his skin cells and complaints still lingered. The spare set I pulled from the linen closet was the floral pattern he'd vetoed as too grandma chic. The pillows fluffed defiantly under my hands. At 9:47 p.m, precisely when he'd usually commandeer the TV for his esports streams, I queued up the sappiest romantic comedy he'd ever rolled his eyes at, turned the volume up 2 notches louder than he'd allow, sang along to the cheesy soundtrack. Halfway through, I realised I was sprawled diagonally across the entire bed, limbs starfished in a way that would have earned me an exasperated shove to make room. His toothbrush still stood sentinel in the bathroom glass. I picked it up between thumb and forefinger, examining the frayed bristles. How had I never noticed he never replaced anything until it was literally falling apart, and dropped it into the trash with a satisfying clatter? Midnight found me on the fire escape, wrapped in the quilt my grandmother made me that he'd deemed too childish for the bed. The city hummed below, all those lives moving without witness or permission. His inevitable "you up?" text came through at 12:36 a.m. I watched the notification pulse once, twice before swiping it away into the digital void. The moon was a clipped fingernail in the sky. Somewhere, he was probably rehearsing his next lines, waiting for his cue. But the script had burned with the toast. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without setting an alarm to accommodate someone else's routine. My dreams, when they came, were wordless and warm. Everyone was waiting for the collapse. I could see it in the sideways glances from co-workers, the way my best friend kept accidentally showing up with takeout and sad eyes. They'd all seen the play before. Third act, centre stage, me crumpling like tissue paper in the rain. The script was worn thin from use. He leaves, I unravel, we reunite to the weary applause of those who loved me enough to watch the cycle repeat. But the days stacked up, 3, then 5, then a full week, and the expected implosion never came. My phone became a museum of his desperation. Missed calls graduated to voicemails where his voice cracked on my name. Texts evolved from passive-aggressive, "Guess you're happy now?" to bargaining. "I booked that sushi place you like," to outright confusion. "Are you seriously ignoring me?" Each notification was a stone dropped into still water, and I, for the first time, let the ripples fade undisturbed. At work, my assistant kept finding excuses to hover near my desk. "You're good?" she finally blurted on Thursday morning, as if checking if I was an imposter. I realised with a start that I was. The old me would have been red-eyed from sleepless nights, jumpy as a stray cat. This version sipped her coffee with steady hands and answered emails with terrifying efficiency. My sister was the first to name the shift. "You look like someone took weights off your ankles," she said during our weekly FaceTime, squinting at me through the screen. I hadn't told her about the breakup. I hadn't needed to. The absence of my usual post-fight tension spoke in tongues. Meanwhile, his sister slid into my DMs like a spy delivering intel. "He's at our parents' place, wearing the same hoodie for 4 days. Keeps saying you'll call." The satisfaction curled warm in my stomach. Not schadenfreude, but the quiet thrill of a student who'd finally solved a problem that had baffled her for years. The real test came Friday night at our usual bar, where mutual friends had gathered under the thin guise of just hanging out. I arrived late on purpose, wearing the red dress he'd always said was too much. The table fell silent when I walked in. Someone's girlfriend mouthed, "Oh shit," into her martini. But there was no scene, no tears. Just me ordering a dirty martini, his least favourite drink, and telling that stupid work story everyone usually missed because he'd interrupt. Laughter came easier than it had in years, unfiltered through the lens of his potential disapproval. His best friend cornered me by the bathrooms. "He's really messed up, you know," he muttered, breath sour with whiskey and second-hand guilt. I studied him, the way his tie was crooked, how he kept glancing toward the door like his loyalty might walk in, and understood suddenly that I wasn't the only one who'd been playing a role. "I know," I said, and meant it. Then added nothing else, letting the silence stretch until he shuffled back to the group. On the walk home, the autumn air sharp against my bare legs, I checked my phone out of habit. 7 new messages from him, each more unravelled than the last. The last one read, "You don't even care, do you?" The streetlight above me flickered as I typed my reply. Not the essay he expected, not the emotional outburst he needed to confirm his importance. Just 2 words sent into the digital night. Not anymore. I turned my notifications off and kept walking. Somewhere behind me, the ghost of who I'd been waited for the world to end. But the pavement stayed solid under my feet, the stars kept their indifferent vigil, and the night held its breath for nothing at all. He showed up on a Tuesday, the day he knew I worked from home, bearing the cheap iced coffee from the bodega he always forgot I disliked. The knock was too confident, that old rhythm he used when pretending nothing was wrong. 3 sharp raps and a pause, like he was giving me time to compose myself before facing him. I saw his silhouette through the peephole, shoulders squared in that jacket I bought him last Christmas. He'd styled his hair just so, the way he did for important meetings or making up after particularly brutal fights. The sight was so meticulously curated it made my teeth ache. When I opened the door, his smile faltered for half a second. Had he expected me to look haggard? Hollow-eyed? Instead, he found me in paint-splattered sweats, hair piled high with a pencil stabbed through the knot. His gaze darted over my shoulder, searching for evidence of my suffering in the apartment behind me. "Brought you this," he said, thrusting the sweating cup toward me like a peace offering. Condensation dripped onto the threshold between us. "Extra caramel, just how you—" "I hate caramel," I said pleasantly. "You always said it was too sweet, so I stopped ordering it." The silence that followed was delicious. His mouth opened, then closed. A fish gasping on the deck of a boat he'd accidentally steered into shallow waters. He recovered fast, that old charm clicking on like a defective neon sign. "Look, I know things got heated, but I've got something for you too." I stepped away before he could finish, returning with the cardboard box I'd packed weeks ago and stashed in the hall closet. His old gym shirts, the paperback he'd left on my nightstand, the charging cable he'd swear I stole every time he couldn't find his. The box was light. He'd never really moved in, had he? Just left enough fragments behind to claim territory. His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. You're really doing this? I smiled, not the tight-lipped one I used to wear when biting back words, but something looser, more dangerous. You said we were done. I believed you. The way his jaw worked told me everything. He'd rehearsed this scene a dozen times in his mirror, but in every version, I was the one holding the coffee, the one begging. He set the cup on my welcome mat, a gift from his mother, like he was marking his claim. You'll call when you calm down. The door was already closing when he added, quieter, you know you will. Through the wood, I heard him linger for 3 full breaths before his footsteps retreated. The iced coffee wept onto the mat as I texted the super to change my locks. When I tipped the contents of the cup down the drain later, the caramel swirled like liquid amber before disappearing without a trace. The clay was alive under my hands, slippery, rebellious, utterly indifferent to my expectations. On the wheel, it slumped sideways like a drunk leaning against a lamppost. Across the studio, Liam barely glanced up from his own work, but I caught the way his shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. Stop judging, I muttered, flicking water at him. My attempt at a vase now resembled a deflated football. Wouldn't dream of it, he said, wiping his hands on a towel already streaked with ochre and cobalt. That's clearly avant-garde. Very tectonic, I groaned, pressing my thumbs too hard into the centre. The walls collapsed inward with a wet sigh. Fuck it, I'm naming this one My Love Life. Liam's snort echoed off the high ceilings. He crossed the studio in 3 strides, smelling of earth and something citrusy. No woodsy cologne, no manufactured masculinity. Just soap and clay. Here, he said, rolling up his sleeves. The trick is to pretend you're not trying to control it. His fingers hovered over mine, not touching but close enough that I felt the heat. Together, we recentered the lump as the wheel spun. His method was infuriatingly simple. Gentle pressure, patience, the willingness to let the material find its own shape. See, he said as the clay finally stopped fighting. Sometimes things just need to fall apart first. The studio door banged open. My exhale caught when I saw him standing there. My ex, his hair slightly overgrown, his favourite jacket missing a button. He looked between us, my hands covered in mud, Liam's forearm brushing my elbow, and something ugly flashed across his face. I was in the neighbourhood, he lied. Liam raised an eyebrow but kept working the wheel. I didn't pull away. You're covered in dirt, my ex said, wrinkling his nose. I smiled, dragging a finger through the slip on my forearm. Clay, actually. It washes off. The silence stretched. Liam, bless him, started whistling some off-key jazz standard. My ex shifted his weight. We should talk. About us. The wheel hummed between us. I watched the vase take shape under my fingers, uneven but interesting, alive in its imperfection. Funny, I said at last. I don't remember Annas. Just you and me. And theme is busy. Liam coughed into his shoulder, poorly disguising another laugh. My ex's neck flushed that telltale red. For the first time, I noticed how his nostrils flared when he was angry, like a bull seeing red. You'll regret this, he hissed. The clay spun, obedient now, rising into something new. Doubt it, I said. When the door slammed, Liam didn't comment, just handed me a sponge. Glaze that bastard gold when it's done. I threw my head back and laughed, real, unself-conscious, the kind that used to get me in trouble. The vase wobbled but held its form. The rumours reached me in fragments, like shards of a broken mirror reflecting warped versions of myself. At first, it was just whispers, friends suddenly cancelling plans with vague excuses, awkward silences when I entered group chats. Then came the screenshots from loyal allies, him telling the guys I'd checked out months ago, implying to mutual friends that there'd been someone else, painting himself as the wounded party nursing his dignity, in whiskey glasses while I gallivanted around town. His best weapon was plausibility. He knew exactly which half-truths to twist. My pottery classes became proof I'd prioritised hobbies over the relationship. My silence morphed into stonewalling, my refusal to chase him a calculated cruelty. The narrative was airtight. She changed, she got cold, she broke his heart. I could have fought back. Should have, by all the old rules. But something fascinating happened when I didn't. At Rachel's birthday drinks, his cousin accidentally spilled wine on my dress while hissing homewrecker under her breath. Instead of reacting, I dabbed at the stain with club soda and asked the bartender for a free replacement. The whole bar watched, not my humiliation, but her unravelling. His college roommate cornered me by the coat check. "He's really hurting, you know," he muttered, breath sour with misplaced loyalty. I studied the way his tie was crooked, how his left eye twitched when lying. "You could at least give him closure." "I did," I said, pulling on my jacket. "It's called moving on." The real turning point came via Instagram. A group photo from his sister's wedding, him front and centre with hollowed cheeks and a brave smile, captioned, "Family sticks together through everything." I liked the post, then uploaded my own picture. The lopsided vase from class, glazed gold, as Liam suggested, captioned simply "New Beginnings." The comments exploded. His aunt demanded I stop flaunting my rebound, while 3 separate people messaged asking if the potter was really as hot as he looked in his studio apron. I responded to none of them, but that night my phone buzzed with his first direct message in weeks. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Moonlight pooled on my sheets as I typed back. "Enjoying what?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, reappeared for a full 3 minutes before his reply came through. "Making me look like the villain." Outside, a siren wailed towards some distant emergency. I ran my finger along the rim of the vase on my nightstand. Imperfect, but mine. "Funny," I wrote back. "You did that all by yourself." Then I blocked him everywhere, not out of anger, but the same way you delete an old shopping app you never use. The rumours didn't stop overnight, but they lost their power when I stopped flinching, like a horror movie muted and played in broad daylight. His words kept spinning, but the axis had shifted. I was no longer the centre of his story. At the next pottery class, Liam slid a fresh lump of clay toward me. "Heard you're the femme fatale of the greater metro area now?" I wedged the clay with more force than necessary. Turns out I look great in black. The call came at 2:17 a.m. That witching hour when loneliness metastasizes into desperation. My phone vibrated across the nightstand, his name flashing like a warning light. 3 years ago, I would have answered before the first ring finished. 3 months ago, I might have silenced it with shaking hands. Now, I watched the screen illuminate the darkness as I reached for the glass of water beside it. His voice was slurry, words bumping into each other like drunks in a narrow alley. "I know you're awake." A pause filled with bar noise and bad decisions. You used to wait up." The sheets were cool against my bare legs as I sat up. Outside, a streetlight flickered, casting jagged shadows across the ceiling. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch until it became its own answer. He exhaled sharply, the sound wet with whatever cheap whiskey he'd been drowning in. "Fuck, just say something. Yell at me. Tell me you hate me." A car alarm wailed in the distance. I traced the condensation on my water glass with one finger. "I don't..." The truth of it settled between us, more devastating than any insult. His breath hitched, whether from surprise or the alcohol I couldn't tell. "Then why?" "Because not hating someone isn't the same as wanting them," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded in the dark. "You mistook my peace for punishment." The line crackled with his unstable breathing. Somewhere in the background, a glass shattered and someone laughed too loud. When he spoke again, his voice had collapsed inward. I miss you. Not us. Not what we had, you. The admission should have landed like a grenade. Instead, it barely made a sound. I know, I said softly. Then, before he could mistake it for weakness. But missing someone doesn't mean you deserved them. The call disconnected somewhere between his choked sob and my next sip of water. I set the phone face down, watching the shadows shift as clouds passed over the moon. Sleep came easier than expected. No racing heart, no rehearsed conversations whispering behind my eyelids. Just quiet, and the gentle certainty of a door finally closing. When I checked my phone in the morning, there was no follow-up message. Just the pale dawn light and the unbroken silence of a chapter ended. He ambushed me in the cereal aisle because apparently even his grand gestures couldn't be bothered with originality. One minute I was comparing sugar content in granola, the next his shadow fell across my cart like a bad omen. You look good, he said, voice sandpapered from last night's bender. His gaze snagged on my bare left hand. No tan line where my promise ring used to be. I tossed a box of cinnamon clusters into the cart. And you look like you slept in a ditch. The truth hung between us in the fluorescent glare. His wrinkled shirt, the coffee stain on his collar, the way his fingers twitched like they wanted to reach for me but forgot the script. Is this really how it ends? He demanded, blocking my path with his body. You just walk away like none of it mattered? A toddler wailed 3 rows over. I adjusted my grip on the cart handle. Funny, you were the one who kept saying we were done. I just agreed. His laugh came out jagged. You didn't fight. Exactly. Something in his face fractured then. Not anger, but the dawning horror of realizing he'd been the villain all along. That all this time, my love had been the only thing painting him the hero. He opened his mouth. To beg, to blame, maybe both, but I was already pushing my cart past him. The wheels caught on a loose tile, wobbled, then rolled smooth. Wait! I didn't. By the time I reached checkout, my hands were steady. The cashier smiled as she rang up my granola. Outside, the sun was shining. Somewhere behind me, a man who used to be my whole world stood frozen between the Cheerios and regret. And for the first time, I didn't turn around to see if he was following. It started with the hoodie, that stupid grey one with the stretched-out collar he'd left draped over my chair like a ghost claiming squatters' rights. For weeks, it had lurked in my apartment, slung over door handles, tangled in laundry piles, appearing wherever I least expected it, like some sad romantic plot device waiting for its dramatic return scene. I held it up to the morning light streaming through my new curtains, bright yellow, his least favourite colour, and realised with sudden clarity I didn't feel anything. Not anger at its persistence, not nostalgia for the way it used to smell like his cheap cologne, just the mild irritation of dealing with clutter. The scissors made a satisfying crunch through fabric. I methodically dismembered the thing, sleeves first, then the hood, finally the torso, until all that remained were ragged squares, perfect for dusting. The last scrap disappeared under the sink with the cleaning supplies, and I laughed out loud at the poetry of it. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Dinner with Liam, 7 p.m. Not a date, just 2 people who like terrible puns and ceramic glaze experiments. The simplicity of it still startled me sometimes. No decoding tones, no preemptive apologies, just easy companionship that asked for nothing but my presence. I arrived early to the studio, finding Liam elbow-deep in clay, his latest creation looking suspiciously like a middle finger. Commission piece, he deadpanned when he caught me staring. We worked in comfortable silence until my new vase began taking shape, taller than my first attempts, the walls thin but sturdy. Liam watched from his wheel, clay-streaked fingers pushing hair off his forehead. You've got the touch now. The realization hit me like cool water. Competence looked good on me, not the frantic perfectionism of trying to be enough for someone else, but the quiet confidence of doing something just because it brought me joy. Later, over burnt pizza and expensive craft beer, Liam asked the question everyone had been too polite to voice. Do you ever miss him? The answer came effortlessly, surprising us both. I miss who I thought he was, but that person never existed. Liam nodded like I'd confirmed some universal truth, then launched into a story about his disastrous attempt at raku firing. I laughed until my ribs ached, the sound echoing off the studio walls. Walking home, the night air crisp against my bare arms, I passed our old haunt, the bar where he'd first said, "We're done," where I'd once cried into a martini glass. Through the window, I saw a couple arguing in our usual booth, the woman's hands fluttering like wounded birds. I kept walking. The stars overhead were the same ones that had witnessed 1,000 of my desperate midnight walks, my tear-streaked Uber rides, my bargaining sessions with the universe. They blinked indifferently now, as if to say we knew you'd figure it out eventually. My apartment welcomed me back, the yellow curtains glowing in lamplight, the half-glazed vase waiting patiently on the counter. The space where his hoodie used to haunt, now occupied by a thriving monstera plant. As I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection smiling around the toothpaste. Not the performative grin from when I used to practice looking happy enough before facing him, but something quieter, truer. The epiphany wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with fireworks or a perfectly timed song cue. Just the gentle understanding that healing isn't a destination. It's the accumulation of small choices, like throwing out old hoodies and keeping plants alive and showing up for people who never make you beg for basic decency. I spat into the sink, rinsed, and went to bed without setting an alarm. Somewhere out there, he was probably still telling our story wrong. But for the first time in years, I was too busy living to correct him. Liam kissed me for the first time in the glaze room, surrounded by shelves of powdered minerals in little jars that looked like stolen moon dust. It happened between discussing cobalt oxide toxicity and whether raku firing was worth the hassle. No dramatic confession, no grand romantic gesture, just his clay-cracked hands pausing mid-sentence to cradle my face as naturally as breathing. When we pulled apart, he didn't ask if I was okay, or if this complicated things. Just wiped a smudge of iron oxide from my cheekbone with his thumb and said, "We should test that Celadon recipe Thursday," like we'd merely agreed on a glaze ratio rather than crossed some invisible threshold. That's how it went with us. No fanfare, no performative angst. We didn't have a song or inside jokes polished for social media consumption. Just shared silences that felt like rest instead of punishment, and the unspoken understanding that neither of us was trying to fix the other. His apartment smelled like sawdust and turpentine. His bookshelves bowed under the weight of art monographs and vintage sci-fi paperbacks. There were no strategic date nights, just me showing up unannounced with takeout to find him elbow deep in some new project, his smile brighter at my arrival than any carefully planned surprise could have elicited. One rainy afternoon, as we sorted through a bin of misfired pottery shards for mosaic material, he asked the only relationship question that ever mattered. What's something you loved as a kid that you let someone convince you to abandon? I turned a broken teacup handle over in my palms. Dance. He said my legs looked competitive. Liam snorted, tossing a shard into the maybe pile. Fragile masculinity is a hell of a drug. That night, he signed us up for swing lessons at the community centre, where we stumbled through basic steps laughing like idiots, my feet remembering rhythms my mind had forgotten. We never said "I love you" in some candlelit moment. It slipped out first when he caught me swearing at a collapsed bowl, then again when I handed him Advil after his first kiln unloading of the season. The words felt different here. Not a bargaining chip or a shackle, Just a quiet fact as unremarkable and essential as the kiln's hum. At the semester's end exhibition, my lopsided Audacity vase sat proudly beside his professional pieces, priced not to sell, but because the form required it. His mother, a potter with laugh lines deeper than her throwing grooves, traced a finger along its uneven rim and whispered, "This one's alive." Later, as we loaded the unsold work into his truck, Liam pressed his forehead to mine. "Next time, try not to make something so obviously metaphor-heavy. It's embarrassing." The streetlight caught the gold in his stubble as I kissed him, tasting salt and the faintest hint of the licorice tea he'd been drinking. No fireworks exploded. No orchestras swelled. Just two people standing in a parking lot, sticky with summer humidity, and the quiet joy of being exactly where they chose to be. Somewhere beyond the studio walls, old ghosts still rattled their chains. But here, in this imperfect present, love wasn't a battlefield or a bargaining table, just a shared workspace where we made messes and didn't apologise for taking up room. I saw him one final time at the farmer's market, of all places. He stood by the apple cart holding a bag of Honeycrisps. My favourite he'd always refused to buy because they were overpriced. Our eyes met across the crowd, and for a suspended moment the universe held its breath. He looked older, not in the distinguished way, but worn thin, like a shirt washed too many times. His new girlfriend hovered nearby, already reaching to take the bag from him, the way I used to. I expected the old familiar pang, the phantom ache of nostalgia. Instead, I felt nothing but a vague curiosity, like spotting an actor from a forgotten TV show. Liam squeezed my hand where our fingers were laced together, his palm rough with fresh calluses. "You good?" A breeze carried the scent of cider donuts through the market. Somewhere, a baby laughed. I took in the scene. His tense shoulders, the girl's possessive grip, the way his gaze kept darting to our joined hands, and realised with delicious clarity he'd been watching me longer than I'd noticed him. "Better than good," I said, loud enough to carry. Liam grinned, pressing a kiss to my temple as we turned away. We didn't look back, not when his voice cracked on my name, not when the crowd swallowed his protests. There were no final zingers, no dramatic exits. Just the weight of his stare burning between my shoulder blades until we rounded the corner to where the flower vendor was arranging autumn blooms. "Sunflowers?" Liam asked, already pulling out his wallet. I tucked one behind his ear, golden petals brushing his wild hair. The morning stretched before us, full of ordinary miracles. Fresh coffee, bare feet on warm pavement, the quiet certainty that some stories end exactly when they should. The last word, it turned out, wasn't a declaration or a confrontation. It was silence, and it belonged to me.